Alright, before we begin, I want to clear something up. That noise you've been hearing in the background isn't my smoke detector. It's this one here, Spike. She's in the next room, but she's so loud you can hear her. So I figured I'd bring her in this time since you can hear her anyways. And if she knows I'm in here, she'll be going nuts. Alright, what we're going to do next is what I call rust weathering. And basically it involves layering of different rust shades using oil paints. I use the Production oil paints, various colors. What I'm going to do in between, I'll put some pictures up of the product itself. That way you can see what I'm using exactly. It's kind of hard to read the colors like this. Besides the oil paints, be using MIG rust effects. I like to start out with the standard for the older rust or corrosion, and later on for staining and streaking I switch to the light rust effects and also the oils. And you can use pigments. I wouldn't use pigments alone for replicating rust. It's okay, but it's not going to look right. I save the pigments till the end, or I'll mix it in with the oil paints only to get some texture, so it looks like corroded metal. And you do that in areas where water would collect, and that would be your darkest rust colors on the horizontal surfaces and nooks and crannies. Like I said, you can use the pigments, mix it in with the oils or rust effects. I like to use basically these three when I'm starting out. It's the light rust brown and dark rust, and I'll occasionally throw in some shadow brown, and I mix that with the standard rust effects, and I use mineral spirits with that, the odorless thinner. Basically what we're doing is we're layering different shades of the oils, the rust is what I call it. For me it's weathering, rust weathering, because it's a longer process. It's kind of like when you're applying dirt, mud, and dust. Same thing, it's weathering. It's what happens in real life and nature. It's not a quick process. You don't just see the rust. It develops over time. That's why you get different shades of rust from the oxidation. A freshly burnt out vehicle, except for in the deserts where it's extremely dry, no moisture, which you will get some rust there too. You'll get light rust developing automatically right off the bat. And that's where these light colors come in handy, and you can use pigments for that. But for what we're doing with the range target, it's been sitting out for years, decades even. So you have different types of rust and oxidation on it. Okay, the older, darker rust, and then for like the rust staining on the paint and newly formed rust, you want to start using some of the lighter stuff. But I always start with dark and work my way light. And on the layering, I alternate sometimes. I'll add a little bit of lighter stuff just to vary the color a little bit. You don't want everything the same color. Okay. I also have some pigments up there that I use towards the end. They're artist pigments. They're not big pigments. But I will sometimes mix that with Production pigments. And that is towards the end, and I'll show you later. This rust weathering, you can do it for a rust bucket, or doing regular exhaust on vehicles. Okay, different shades of the rust on there. I mean, for this rust weathering, you can use it for a completely rusted out vehicle, or if you're just doing some chips with streaking and rust staining. Alright, I'm going to get rid of her, and we're going to get to work. And like I said, there'll be some still pictures of the products I'm using along with the model, because I know you can't really see in the videos from filming the different shades you know, the difference it makes when you're adding the layering. You can see that much better when I zoom in with the still pictures. I'm going to start with the turret. And what I've done is I've mixed up some dark rust and light rust brown with some of the MIG standard rust effects. And I've mixed it basically to a little thicker than a wash or pin wash. Okay, and what we're going to do is apply this to the rust areas. This is working similar to a filter. I know I've said that so many times already in these videos, but that's the whole point of the layering. You're not putting heavy coats on, you're just filtering different effects basically. Like I said before, I like to start with the dark and then go light. And I'll basically give all the chipped rusted areas a couple of layers of this. Excuse me. Just to give it some texture, the chipped area some texture and some color. Some I'll go back and maybe darken a little more for the older corroded rust. And it dries pretty quick using those thinners. So you can do an area, go on to something else, come back, add to it. I had already given this one thin coat. By that I mean I had it thinned a lot more than it is now. You really want to make sure you get it in these tiny holes and the ricochets, all little marks. You don't want it too dark in there. Just some of the larger impact holes. There I'll darken the centers. The lighter staining around the rust chips we'll do later with the light rust effects and maybe some of the oil paints. I like to save that towards the end. You'll get some staining when you're using this darker mix, which is good, and then it's just a matter of adding the streaking and the staining with light colors. Like with anything, takes practice and of course lots of research. You want to study some photographs of real life tanks or any other vehicle that's rusted up. You can look at photos, you can go outdoors and look for something that's quite rusted, and then it'll all make sense of what I'm doing here. I used to carry a camera with me. I'd be constantly stopping and photographing rusty equipment or a fence, whatever it was. If it was rusty, I would whip out the camera and take pictures. Just like building a model, except for this one I built it out of the box. But a lot of people tend to want to be as accurate as possible, so a lot of research is required, you know, to make the corrections, and so you have a nice accurate model. The same thing with painting. You want the right colors, you know, whatever, the green, you want the right shades of green, and the weathering, you know, with dust and everything, you want to have the right colors of dust. You don't want to have Africa dust in Russia. It's the same way with rusting a vehicle. You want to get it to look real. The whole point of it. You don't want to waste all that time building a model, painting it, and not doing too good of a job with the rusting. It is, after all, one of the main things that will catch a person's eye, is the rust. If it doesn't look real, or if you just throw some very bright rust on there, it's going to stick out. So when that starts to dry, what I like to do is take my large dampened brush, and in the larger rusted up areas, I like to just stipple it a little bit. You don't want the brush too wet, because we're using the oil paints and it's not thinned a lot. It's a thicker mix. When you lightly stipple it, you'll start gaining some texture to it, and then, you know, with the next layering, you can do the same thing. It's, like I said, the layers. And you can also touch up, you know, remove any excess with a smaller dampened brush. I had already previously dampened the surface, just like before. Another thing you can do, you get your large brush. You can start this now. You just want to be very subtle with it. I'll do it right here. With the darker color for the older streaks, you apply some of the effect and just pull it down. You don't have to go too crazy with it. You don't want it too dark also. Okay, you can leave it like that, because later on, what you're going to do is, that's a middle shade of rust. You can get some of the light rust effects or oils, and you can hit the perimeters of that. And then with dark rust, apply dark rust to the center of that. Once it's fairly dry, just with a wide brush streak it down. And there'll be more streaking to be done later. What I did with the hull, I had already done the top with 1 or 2 layers of the rust weathering, and on the front glasses where it was already starting to dry, all I did was take the damp brush and just started pulling down, and this will start creating some streaking and staining. And you can go ahead and start adding more. Just put a little drop of rust there and just pull down with your damp brush. Didn't get much on that one. And you just want to keep building it up, layer after layer. You can do it all in one shot, you know, add the rust and then streak it down and do the next spot. I like to slowly do it, just like with time, with the real thing. You're not going to get a rust streak one time and that's it. You're going to have multiple streaks, you know, over a period of time. Older streaks will be darker, and then of course the newer ones will be a lighter color. So when I do it, I like to do it just like Mother Nature does it. You know, every time it rains, you get a rust streak. You can take some light rust effects and just start streaking. And I'll go ahead later on, when we're doing the actual staining and streaking, I'll hit some of these other small ones and add some subtle streaking like I did here. You probably can't see it too good right now, but I'll have some still photographs of it with the video. That way you can really see what it looks like.